And welcome again to Cottage Talk Fulham Media Buzz. Silly season. WTF is going on with Fulham Football Club. Joining me right now is my good friend Dan Crawford from HamyN.com and the Green Pole Podcast. I think he's going to have something interesting to share on the Green Pole Podcast besides doing the show with me. Before we go on any further, just want to say please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts to Cottage Talk. Leave us a review. Would highly appreciate that. Dan, welcome back to the show. I'm looking forward to talking about some stories in the media. It's been really crazy the last couple of days, and we're going to go through it. And I want your honest opinion if you believe the stories, if you do not. How you doing?
Russ, good to see you, mate. I hoped it would be on a less crazy day than we've been having, but you know, here we are. You're not selling Cottage Talk to the Saudi Arabians, are you? Can we just clarify? There's no truth to that exclusive story that's just broken on Sky Sports News, is there? No.
Well, we have a lot to talk about in regards to Sky Sports because they've broken some interesting stories, and I want to get your thoughts if you believe it or if you think it's crap. So let's get to it. Let's start with the one from today, and it involves Marco Silva. And this is a big one, Dan, because Marco's on the last year of his contract. We've talked about this on the Green Pole, and now we're talking about it here on Cottage Talk. And I think what's going on with Marco is affecting Fulham's signings, honestly, because I think if he signed a longer-term deal, maybe we would have a couple signings. He probably wants to see signings before he signs a deal. So it's kind of this vicious circle that we're seeing. But let's talk about the speculation that a club in Saudi Arabia is offering 40 million pounds to Marco Silva, 20 million pounds a year. Actually, you can read this article on HamyN.com from Chloe White. I want to give her credit for posting the story. Dan, are you believing the story?
Well, so let's rewind a second. There are some things that are true, and you listed most of them, which is that Marco Silva is still in the last year of his contract, and he has been very consistent in respect of waiting to see what Fulham do in the transfer window until he signs his new contract that has been offered to him. We given to understand, I believe that's at least a 3-year deal, but what you would consider a long-term deal to reward Marco Silva for his fantastic achievements at Fulham Football Club since he took over from a man who I won't recall. Because it will just depress us. Okay.
Exactly.
Now, so it is true that he's in the last year of his contract, and I do believe it is true that he's waiting to sort of see what happens, and he's not the first Fulham manager in the history of you and I doing this podcast, Russ. I think every single Fulham manager in the decade that I've been speaking to you, or head coach, has had an issue with regards to this type of thing, the summer transfer recruitment. And the first one to have an issue was Slavisa Jokanovic, who wanted to sign somebody called Andreas Pereira. Turns out that might have been a good idea. Now,
maybe
knowing what we know now, probably a very good idea.
Right.
So those things are true. I can't tell you if Al Ahly have offered Marco Silva £40 million to go and coach in the Saudi Premier League today, as Sky Sports rather breathlessly reported while I was doing something else this afternoon. I mean, very, very silly of me to take my eyes off the ticker tape of Sky Sports News, wasn't it? Especially after last night. We'll get on to that.
Okay.
So the problem I've got with this one is Marco Silva is not in London. We know that for a fact.
That's right.
We know he's closer to you than he is to me right now.
That's right. I think he's in New Jersey probably about right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't have precise GPS readout on his location. Now, what the reporting, and I use that term loosely because there doesn't seem to be any second-hand corroboration of this story at all anywhere.
I haven't seen any.
Is that Al Ahly, who are owned by the Public Investment Fund, one of the 4 Saudi Pro League clubs who were bought by the Public Investment Fund and backed substantially, have offered Silva £40 million, and they're talking with Silva's representatives in London today. Now that, I mean, I'm not sure that Marco Silva would authorise his representatives plural because he only has one. So interesting that they said plural.
Right.
And that a presentation was being made to those representatives today, and that Al Ahly wants an answer immediately because the Saudi Pro League season starts in 2 weeks' time. Well, I mean, you know, there is one thing I would throw into this, two things to say in terms of the broader context. One, if Marco Silva was so determined to go to Saudi Arabia, he might have accepted the offer from Al Hilal, right, which was of a similar range of pricing in terms of salary, and two, he might also have not been so pivotal in re-signing William, which is the one sort of real positive thing to come out of this last couple of weeks, is that Marco Silva was very definitely involved in saying, "Come on, I want William in the team. What are we doing here, lads? Let's make a deal." Now, two things. Would Williams sign the contract and publicly praise Marco Silva if there was any doubt about Marco Silva being in the Craven Cottage dugout, or rather Goodison Park dugout on the 12th of August? I mean, I doubt that. And two, the cheek of these guys to say, "Oh, by the way, tell us right now, and here's a load of money." The thing about Marco Silva is he was determined to manage again in the Premier League,
right,
in England, to prove himself because he felt like he had a point to prove. He still feels he has a point to prove. He's an ambitious young manager, and as we've seen, people do sometimes get a bit ahead of themselves and leave Fulham for pastures new, thinking it's a big step forward in their career. And it doesn't always work. I'll leave it at that. So the answer to this is, they might well have offered him a lot of money. It's what the Saudis do. But it probably would be the death knell of Silva's ambitions within European football, because, it's kind of a retirement home for people who need a paycheck. And I've never got the impression that Marco Silva is motivated primarily by money. Of course, I could be entirely wrong.
Right.
And I am checking my phone and the 3 monitors that are in here to check that he hasn't actually... gone and done it now. But no, I the breathless reporting of it caught me by surprise. But I would point out that Sky Sports News have played fast and loose with the truth many times, as we pointed out. And at the moment, Marco Silva's managing Fulham in the United States. There are still a lot of things we need to sort out with regards to the season. But I get the sense that he wants to manage Fulham in the Premier League. So I'm less concerned about this one. But again, I'm not the oracle. I'm not as well connected as some people. So, he could surprise me.
Okay. The one thing that I think stands out to what you said, Dan, that made me think about it: why would William have signed back with Fulham if he did not feel that Marco was leaving? Like, why would he come back to Fulham? I think Marco being here is huge. I'll even say the same thing, Dan. Why would Jedi have re-signed?
I was about to say, why would Anthony Robinson ink a 5-year contract?
5-year contract, okay? So for me, do I think the Saudis are interested in Marco Silva? Yes. I just don't
really interested in anything that moves at the moment.
Right.
Some credibility.
Right, exactly. But I think when push comes to shove, I think that this is speculation. Could there be something to it? Yes, but I truly believe that Marco Silva will still be the full manager because of, as you said, Dan, the ambition that he has. And I think he's ambitious for Fulham. I think he wants better for Fulham. I think that's also, Dan, you and I talked about this off air. I think that might be why he has not signed a new contract yet, is he's waiting to be proven that the team's going to back him. And that might be, as I said to you, a little bit of a vicious circle, because I think players might be waiting for Marco to sign a new deal before they sign. So, but I think what's going on, again, it's just a theory of mine, that the reason why Marco hasn't signed yet a new deal with Fulham, he's just waiting. He's waiting to be proven that he's going to have a team that can contend for Europe. That's what I think.
Well, he may be waiting to see what happens with regards to a certain Serbian striker. I'm sure we'll come on to that.
Yes, absolutely. Why not go there right now? Let's go. Let's talk about Mitro. Why not? Because everyone's probably wondering when we're going to talk about Mitro. So let's go there, Dan. And this has been going on with Mitro. And what's interesting about this, and we'll talk about the Tony Khan angle in this in just a second, but what I find fascinating about this is, and I keep telling people this, that Fulham have all the leverage in regards to Mitro. They absolutely do. You will agree with me on this. He has 3 years left on his contract. They don't have to do anything. Now, I've heard people say, well, then he'll be unhappy. He won't play. And okay, but he's a professional. He's going to play. He's going to want to play football. And I've been given this, and you can attest to this, the basically comparison to Louis Saha and how badly that ended, and how Chris Coleman said, no way, that's not, and it did happen. So I think that's why people think eventually this will happen. Dan, I don't think Fulham are going to sell. This also goes to what Tony Khan happened to talk about in an interview he did over here. Basically, he was telling in this interview that he was committed to keeping his star players. I'm assuming he means Paulinho and Mitro. So I don't see Mitro going anywhere. That's my opinion on this. I think we're going to get through the window. He'll be a player for Fulham Football Club, and I wouldn't be shocked if he has a new contract with Fulham Football Club.
Oh, you said to me you were feeling positive, and you've really put the positive spin on that one.
So, well, how do you feel, Dan? How do you feel?
I don't know how to feel about this. One thing is clear. I'm reluctant to get involved in the rubbishing of Alexander Mitrovic, given his achievements at Fulham Football Club, and the fact that he could have left Fulham Football Club at many points during his time after we got relegated twice. The inverse of that, or the reverse of that, of course, is I think Mitrovic owes Fulham Football Club in respect to the last few months at Craven Cottage. You know, he missed the 8 games for, what did they say, assaulting Chris Kavanagh at Old Trafford. I'm still not over that.
No, you know, I can't tell.
That's an assault. Like the prisons of England are full. We won't go into politics, Russ. You know, okay. It doesn't take much for me to get started. But if that's an assault, we wouldn't have any room anywhere. You'd just be... Anyway, the point is, Mitrovic probably cost Fulham a place in the FA Cup semi-final. Not alone with his actions at Old Trafford. He then was publicly supported by Fulham, not just during the whole thing of how long's the ban going to be. There's a whole witch hunt, you know. And then he was supported by Fulham and the fans during his time, you know, enforced suspension, waiting around. And he got that rapturous reception at Southampton with all the Serbian flags, and he scored. And he gave an interview, you all remember this, the end of the season, to the Fulham Fix podcast with Felix White and Ivan Berry. And he talked about Craven Cottage being home. You know, he loves it. And I'm like, well, okay. Put these things together, what he said then and what he's purported to have said now. Now, this is important. Yep. This is from last night, Sky Sports News. Paul Gilmore pops up. Paul Gilmore, one of the people who propagated the idea that Willian was at Nottingham Forest's training ground having a medical when he was at least 6,000 miles away at the time. So, you know, I think there may have been some miscommunication. The story boils down to the fact that, and there's no independent corroboration of this, Mitrovic has kept his silence. If he really wants to go to Saudi Arabia, okay. He really wants to go to Saudi Arabia. There's a way he can go to Saudi Arabia. He can come out and say, sorry, Fulham, thank you, Fulham, for everything you've done for me. I really want to leave to get this really big paycheck to go and play in a place that nobody really plays in. It's really hot. And I'm going to go there, and I'm principally going to go there to set up my family for the remainder of our lives. I don't necessarily agree with that as a sort of solution. But that's really where we're going. And he, through intermediaries and through media reports, has said, I've served Fulham well. And there is no doubt about that. He has served Fulham well, but Fulham did give him the opportunity to play first-team football when he wasn't playing any. We did get promoted to the Premier League, and he had, and we made sure that he was the focal point of the team when all of that was in question. He apparently, and I use the term apparently, well, very strongly here, has told his relatives, Russ, that he doesn't want to play for Fulham ever again, which seems a bit drastic considering he looked reasonably happy in a photograph that swiftly disappeared from Instagram this afternoon with Tom Cairney and Sasa Lukic on the way to, I'm not sure where they were flying into, New York, I think.
Yes, I believe they're flying into New York.
Then, I don't know which airport, but he looked reasonably happy at that point. Now, we are supposed to believe that somehow Mr. Gilmore, with a dubious track record in terms of getting everything correct, has overheard this conversation, or more likely been told that this has been said. And he got it up there within sort of half an hour. And now, well, if he wants to go, I would be fine. You mentioned Louis Sahar. I'd be fine with a player leaving Fulham to better themselves. Mitrovic is good enough to play for a top level side. I don't think that's in dispute. If he said, I want to go and play in the Champions League, it's important to preserve my international career, all of this, I want to challenge myself at the highest level. It'd be difficult, but I don't think anyone would begrudge him that. This thing of, I'm going to go and play in Saudi Arabia, and the valuation is what's made him angry. Well, so Fulham value him at £52 million, apparently, again.
Right.
There's been no second sourcing of this. Everyone's just reporting what Sky Sports News have said. Well, where do they get £52 million from? It's about 250 million Saudi Arabian royal, whatever the currency is. Right? It's an exact. If you do the current currency exchange to British pound sterling, it works out at £52 million exactly. Right? So that's the valuation. Now, Al Hilal made two offers, one of £22.5 million, apparently, which is £0.5 million more than we actually paid for him in the first place.
Right.
In 2018. He's undoubtedly a better player than he was in 2018. And they then made another offer of £35 million, both of which were immediately rejected. This seems to have angered Mitrovic, but as you pointed out, Fulham hold all the cards. The bit that I sort of struggle with is, well, okay, there are people who say, oh, we have to sell him, or, he can rot in the reserve, we should sell him and be done with it. Well, if you sell him, you aren't going to get another Alexander Mitrovic. They don't grow on trees, right? He's particularly important to the focal point. And to your last point, he wants to play football. He wants to play for his country, probably in another major tournament, because the tournament in Qatar, in a hot country with no history of football, ironically, Mitrovic struggled to hit the heights of where he was playing previously for Fulham. And pertinent to this, he missed at least 3 games, possibly 4, I'm trying to remember, prior to the tournament, because he'd got injured playing for Serbia and he didn't want to risk. And there was some turn and fro between the medical teams. I think I was on your show speaking about this at the time.
Yep.
So Mitrovic wants to go and play in Saudi Arabia. I'm not having that it's been his dream to always go and play for Al Hilal and he watched the Crown Prince Cup in Belgrade aged 4. I'm not having that. Okay. There are other things at play, and I don't want to get anybody sued or anything like that. But there are 2 words I will say to you that is the driver of this. That's Pini Zahavi. Yeah. And I just urge your listeners, readers, audience to Google Pini Zahavi, and you will see why I say that.
Can I ask you a question, Dan? Is he the same agent for Manor Solomon?
Yes.
Okay. So I find that fascinating that he's the same agent, that he's a very well-known agent, and maybe that was the link that brought Minor Solomon to Fulham Football Club. But yeah, I would do what Dan just said. I think this is agent-driven because obviously the agent can make a lot of money from this, not just Alexander Mitrovic, but we'll have to see how this all plays out. But I can't get past a couple of things, like you had mentioned. I'm glad that you went into good detail on this, Dan. It's what I said prior. Fulham have the leverage here. They have the 3-year contract. And not only that, we have the Premier League on our side. He's settled in London. These are all the pros here. Now, a con on Fulham's side is that if he's offered this amount of money, it's a huge amount of money. That's hard to turn down. But
he doesn't get the chance to turn it down or accept it until whoever's offering him the money also matches Fulham's valuation.
correct.
And that is enshrined in international football rules. Now, nobody abides by the rules. That much is clear because they're all talking to each other. Or if they're not talking to each other, they're talking to someone at Sky Sports News or Fabrizio Romano or some gentleman who I'd never heard of before this week. There's a gentleman called Ben Jacobs.
I've never heard of him either, to be honest with you.
Well, he's just mixed up Al Hilal and Al Ali.
I thought he did.
And I've never heard of this gentleman. Apparently, he's a presenter. I've seen him interviewing somebody. And he apparently has the inside scoop on all of these things. And I don't even know that everybody at Fulham quite knows what on earth is playing out in some of these scenarios. I certainly don't. But I'm confident that some of these people don't either. And it goes back to what we talked about with João Palhinha, who, if you believe some reporting, now he really wants to go to West Ham again. Russ, it's like we've stepped back in time. You know, we had that whole thing with João Palhinha's disappearing release clause.
Oh, that was horrible, Dan. That was, again, I think that was one of the most fraudulent things I've seen, was the release clause in João Palhinha's contract, which, as we now know, doesn't exist, but it was reported. And, of course, that started the whole thing with talkSPORT.
Again, over a couple of days ago, last night, the day before, I can't remember, they all blend into one with this yellow ticker tape nonsense spreading to talkSPORT. talkSPORT started it off again that West Ham were in advanced negotiations with Fulham over the £40 million transfer of João Palhinha. That's complete nonsense.
It's ridiculous.
They did make an offer, but it's like me saying, Russ, I want to buy a house for £10. You'd say, no, thank you. It wouldn't be much of a negotiation, would it?
Sorry, that's actually pretty funny, Dan. But
Stephanie would throw you out, really.
But what's interesting about this, yes, they were reporting £40 million, but it's laughable. Anyone that follows Fulham knows that there's no way that they're selling him for £40 million. They value him probably closer to 90 to 100 million pounds. I don't want
£40 probably buys João Palhinha's left boot. I ain't gonna get.
He's that valuable to Fulham, Dan. I think that's the point. The point for me with João, and then of course with Mitro, is that they're more valuable to Fulham than maybe they are to other clubs. So if Fulham value him, let's just say that it's true, and there's no truth to it. It's just speculation that it's £52 million. Let's just play the game. Well, then you better come up to that, because there's a reason why it's that high. It's because he's extremely valuable to Fulham Football Club. He is. And I think he's important to everything that they do. And I truly believe if Tony Khan, Shahid Khan, Alistair McIntosh, everyone at Fulham stand to their beliefs here and do not buckle, Alexander Mitrovic will play for Fulham Football Club. I believe that because he's under contract. As you said, Dan, he's going to want to play for his national team. He's going to want to play football. And I'm just saying, I just think if the club stays very true to themselves, I think this thing eventually will blow over. But I don't think it's over yet. But I think it's something that we'll have to continue to follow. But right now, he's in America. That's a good sign.
Well, it's better than this idea that he had to be persuaded to go to America. Well, maybe he did, but if he didn't go to America and fulfill the obligations under his contract, he'd be sued for breach of contract.
That's right.
And then he would have a problem because nobody would employ him.
Right.
And I think there is a broader point about this, which is about Saudi Arabia in general and what they're doing, and you alluded to this earlier, you might need to explain to people who hail from my neck of the woods what this podcast or show was that Tony Khan was holding forth.
Okay.
on.
Sure. So let's go there now. So let's talk a little bit of what Tony shared. I believe he was on the Dan Le Batard show. It's a radio show in America. And basically, Tony came on this show, and you and I were joking back and forth messaging because he used the word murder.
I've got the quote. I've got the full quote. Shall I read it?
Please read the quote because I find the quote fascinating.
So the gentleman who's asking the questions is talking about Mitrovic, and he says something along the lines of, what's your view on how hard Saudi Arabia are pushing? And Tony Khan says, it is amazing. I think if you have enough money, you can get away with anything, including murder. And, try to sign up all the top players in the world. Certainly they have approached a lot of great players, and I'm very, very interested to see where this goes. But for us, we're definitely committed to keeping our top stars and doing what it will take. We've got a great, great, great team. We had a great season. It was one of the best seasons in the history of Fulham. And I'm really excited about this coming season. So he doesn't specifically reference Mitrovic there, but I took that to mean you're coming for our players. You're coming for Mitrovic. You're coming for Polina, potentially. You're coming for Marco Silva, and you're not going to get anywhere. But the interesting part for me was, Tony Khan's audition to be the Secretary of State when he said, I think if you have enough money, you can get away with anything, including murder, which possibly the thing that Tony Khan has said that I've agreed with the most of anything that I've ever heard Tony Khan say, because absolutely that is correct, because of the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
Yes. I think that's what he was referencing. I believe that's what he was referencing.
Well, I believe so. And if we're talking about a free press and a free society and people being settled in London and enjoying the Western way of life, some people who are accepting these offers to go and play in Saudi Arabia may have a little bit of a shock when they push a referee, when they want to leave the club that they've signed for, in a manner that they would normally expect to in a Western society. And I would just say, we come from a World Cup in Qatar. Abdes Awadu, the former Fulham centre-back, will tell you how difficult it was to leave Qatar when he was out of contract and wanted to leave. The Saudi Arabians have no compulsion about... somebody asked me today, do the Saudi Arabians have a version of financial fair play? And I said, well, yeah, if you don't pay the president enough, he might cut you up in a consulate somewhere. I mean, maybe we're drifting. But the point about this is Tony Khan was very clear about what the Saudi Arabians are doing. It's sports washing, pure and simple.
Right.
They've done it with Newcastle United. They've done it in golf. They've done it in horse racing. They've done it in many sports, and it is to
change the image,
Dan, to pull the wool over people's eyes, or to remove some of those searching. We're just like you. We invest in these pastimes, but it's money laundering, essentially. And what has disappointed me, with a few honourable exceptions in the Western media. But even in the UK, nobody talks about the sports washing of Newcastle United. They're all talking about Harvey Barnes and who the next player is. And Eddie Howe just sits there and says, I'm a football manager. Well, I'm a football fan, but I'm also something else as well.
Right.
And, I am not a conspiracy theorist, or at least I try hard not to be. But I do think it's interesting that Tony Khan goes and says that very recently, Russ.
Yep.
It came to light within the last 24 hours, those comments. And immediately within 24 hours, my social media has been bombarded with Saudis criticising Tony Khan and criticising me. and my website for publishing these comments, given that Britain are colonialists and all these kind of things. And I did want to say to them, look, I'm going on a podcast with a man who literally lives in the place where they tossed the tea into the water to get rid of the British all that time ago. You know, like there is room for some sort of nuance, but not when you're sort of murdering journalists and, you know, pretending that it's okay because you invest in things that can sort of make that a little bit more palatable. That doesn't work for me. But it's interesting that Tony Khan referenced it. Somebody put it up on Twitter and said that's a daft comment. He would have to apologise. I mean, I really hope nobody's going to apologise for those comments, and I don't think they will, because they're absolutely spot on.
I was going to say, Dan, I'm glad that he said what he had to say, and because I've got some views on this as well with everything that's going on in Saudi Arabia. And listen, many players are going over there, and the clubs are allowing their players to go over there. I am, at this point, glad that Fulham Football Club are playing what I would call a little hardball when it comes to Mitro with the Saudi Arabian team, just because I think you got to put Fulham first, Dan. The way that I look at the Mitro thing for me, and I'll get your thoughts on this, is I think if they sell Mitro, they're putting Mitro first. If they keep him, they're putting Fulham first. Now, others might disagree with me on this, but I think because he's under contract, if you sell him, you are doing his wishes. I think you are not putting the club first, because then you have to be in this replacement game that I keep talking about, Dan. I want Fulham to be in the building game, not the replacement game, Dan. I look at everyone applauds the wonderful job that Brighton Hove Albion are doing, and they're doing a great job. Eventually, you're going to miss. You're going to miss on the replacements. You're going to end up like Southampton. It took a while, but Southampton started missing. They were selling all their best players.
Yeah, I had to speak to our good friend Simon Peach the other day. He's not taking it well.
I feel bad for Simon. Simon's a huge Southampton supporter, even though he covers Manchester United. I'm sure he isn't taking it well. But he has
a long history on this very show. That's why I referenced him in this.
Thank you.
Context.
Thank you, my friend. But listen, my point in all of this is that Fulham need to think about Fulham before they think of Mitro, before they think of anyone else. They got to put the club first. I think if you sell Mitro, you're putting Mitro first. So I think they need to stay strong. And based on Tony's comments, I have a feeling it's going to be difficult for Mitro to move. And I actually hope that that's true. Not that I don't begrudge him wanting to go, but he's under contract. And the way I look at it, if I go to my boss and say, listen, I've been offered a better deal. Can you match this? Can you let me out of my contract? And my boss said, no, I can't let you out of your contract because I have no one that can replace you. I would honor that. And I want Mitro to honor his contract. That's where I'm on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would just offer the following in response and to develop the conversation. There are two things here. I get what you're saying about being in the building game and everything like that. It's also about the message it sends about Fulham Football Club. You know, we have moments in our history. If you look back at Fulham's history over the period, you know, we've never won a major trophy, although we have, because the Intertoto Cup is now the Europa Conference League, and apparently it's the most important trophy ever, and that's why João Palhinha is going to be playing for West Ham. And also, they won the World Cup in 1966. So yeah, I had to get that in. Right.
That's okay.
Fulham have never won a major trophy, and we've never really been all that successful despite our wonderful history. And the reason is, every time we get to the cusp of a really good side, something happens and we can't have nice things. We couldn't have Clint Dempsey and Moussa Dembele playing together in the same team. That wasn't allowed. We couldn't even have Dimitar Berbatov and Brian Ruiz playing in the same team. Thank you, Rennie Moolenstein. That time. I'm not going to go through it all because it's a long history of things, right? But the point about this is, it's the message you send to your competitors about when Fulham's ambition. So the point we were talking about earlier is Marco Silva is ambitious. Mr. Khan, the ownership of Fulham, they're all ambitious. But you have to The only where I would diverge from you slightly about putting Mitrovic first, you put the club first in all instances. One, if the offer is unbelievable, you may have to consider it, even if Mr. Shahi Khan is as rich as he is.
Right.
Two, if Mitrovic's behaviour deteriorates to such a degree that he's a disruption in the dressing room, or he becomes a distraction, you may have to take some action that would mitigate against that. But all I would say about the whole thing is strikers are hard to find. In Fulham's history, you hear regularly on this show from Gordon Davis, Ivor Davis. Wonderful man, great ambassador for Fulham Football Club. But Ivor will not need to be reminded of the fact that he had to leave Fulham to go to another team who I can't mention because it's a swear word in my house. And then he had to return to Fulham to break the goal scoring record because he didn't really like it up the road. You referenced Louis Sahar,
yes,
right, who left for Manchester United, and he won some trophies at Manchester United, but he was injury ravaged for much of his career after that. He did speak later and has spoken more recently about how he regrets the manner of his leaving. We could throw in lots of other people whose moves didn't go to plan. Sean Davis, many more from Fabio Carvalho to give a more prescient example. The point is, we have a strong squad, or we're trying to build a stronger squad. We have to attract players in and quickly in this period. I would have liked to have seen some players before now, but we've referenced that. That is not going to happen. That is not the way the Fulham hierarchy looks to do their transfer business. However much it infuriates the fan base. And I would say something else. The football club sells us on its ambition. We've renovated Riverside Stand. It's going to be a statement. We've got a wealthy owner. The season ticket prices have increased dramatically. Fulham Football Club therefore has a duty to its fans, its customers, to put the best possible team on the pitch every time. And it also has a duty with the Category 1 academy structure to look at some of these younger players who you will see maybe for the first time.
I'm looking forward to it. Philadelphia,
Sam Amicia, Delano McCoy-Splat, who's capped at international level at 18 for Jamaica. Really interesting young player, and many more. I'm thinking of maybe Jay Stansfield or Marcel Godot. They may not be ready yet to fill the boots of Alexander Mitrovic, and who would be at this point. But there are options for people, and we have to sell everybody at every time on our ambition and on the club moving forward. Because if you stand still in the Premier League, you die. You don't die, you go down.
That's right, Dan.
I don't want that to happen. And I would finish here. We'll probably have to, unless we're going to go on for about 5 hours, we'll probably have to wrap it up at some point. The suggestion, the laughable suggestion by a reporter who has a source or claims to have a source that Marco Silva is accepting this offer, and Fulham have approached Javier Pereira, who is currently the manager of Shanghai Port, and he is going to be the new manager. I mean, I'm excited to discuss with you in the next podcast that we do how Javier Pereira's team is going to line up, not at Goodison Park, but in the second leg of the summer series, which we haven't even talked about yet. And we do need to talk about that.
We do
against Aston Villa, isn't it?
Well, actually, the first match is against Brentford. But listen, before we wrap this up, I just want to say, coming up next, Dan and I are going to talk a little bit about the summer series. I'm also going to ask him, how does Fulham meet their ambitions this summer? Because they haven't at this moment. Okay, Dan, to finish up, I do want to talk about the summer series at the very end. But before I do that, we've been talking a lot about ambition, right? And you just ended by talking about ambition. Right now, Fulham have not added any new players. I know you could say Willian is a new player, but he played with Fulham last season. So I want to get your thoughts. Why have they not signed any players yet? Who do you blame on this? Is it Tony? Is it Alistair? Is it Marco not signing his new deal? Why have they not been able to sign any players now? Because I think that their targets have gone up. I think that they've gone up on quality targets, but they have not been able to bring anyone in yet. Why do you think that is the case? And how quickly do you think they can rectify it?
So I don't want to be pedantic, but Fulham did sign Chris Donald from Perth Glory. He's going to play for the under-20. He has, in fact, played for the under-21s at Bromley.
Okay.
He's an excellent progressive passer from Australia. Fit in really nicely. He may not be considered a senior player yet. He has the potential to be one. Look, I can't speak as to why it is that Fulham haven't got people across the line at this point, because we're not quite there. I'm not involved in the transfer negotiations, thank goodness. Because it's bad enough watching it from afar and translating from all these people who seem to know what's going on. And but look, it's clear that Fulham need to do some strengthening. They need to do some strengthening in a number of areas. We know where they are. They're going to need to sign some centre backs. They're having a good go at signing Morato from Benfica, aren't they? They're probably going to have to admit defeat on that one. Sometime soon. It looks like they're going to miss out on Eagle, to your friends, who I hope won't be too offended that they're about to miss at Brighton, who it looked like they're going to sign Eagle or the Fiorentina, Brazilian centre back from Fiorentina. There is interest in a couple of other centre backs, including Salisu, apparently according to Sky Sports News, but they seem to print anything these days. I have to see if Chloe's manning the site while I'm talking to you, so she might have written that one up. But we're a little bit sceptical about Sky Sports News and its source.
Just a little.
Yeah. You then get into an interesting one of, do you need a midfielder? You probably do. Fulham have had a couple of goes at signing Andre in various transfer windows from Fluminense. A really interesting player, but more of a project because he's 22 years old, just been capped by Brazil recently. Interested in coming to the Premier League. You're going to need some wingers, even if Willian has re-signed. You're a little bit light on the right-hand side, given that Bobby De Cordova-Reid has been playing for Jamaica until very recently in the Gold Cup. It means that only Harry Wilson's shock of bleached, I don't know what you would call that, white hair. Have you seen it?
I have seen it. It's a little shocking. Yes, I have.
I'm not one to give sort of advice on my
Neither am I.
Challenged hairstyle, but yeah, that did surprise me. You're going to need some wingers because Marco likes to play with wingers, and of course you're going to need another centre forward. I would have thought, regardless. So what's the situation with this? They're trying to sign players. It's difficult to sign players, especially when many clubs want to sign the same targets that you do.
Right.
And also, we've seen ourselves, they might not be keen to sell the player that you want to buy from them. And we go through this sort of posturing. And I think the uncertainty over Marco Silva's contract, over the fact that we seem to still prefer to, or at least have an open mind about pursuing deals at the end of the transfer window or closer to the end of the transfer window. The honest answer is I don't know why we haven't signed players, but I know they're trying. But the point is, you look at the squad that they've taken to that has arrived in America, and if you're putting that up as the 25-man squad or thereabouts, it's a bit light, isn't it?
Very much so.
Especially if you were to lose a couple of players from it. And even then, if you were just to lose some people with injuries, we saw the difference last year between our first choice 11 and then what we were left with at times.
Right.
Who do I blame? Well, I could blame all of them, frankly.
I think there's a little bit to go around.
I could blame the leadership of the football club for not having a proper, clearly defined strategy in place, or at least a hierarchy that ensures that the head coach's targets are given equal weighting to everything else, and that he's happy, because you want to make all of your employees happy. At least you should do in your company. I hope they do in your company, that you're about to leave to take a better offer. from somewhere else. Hopefully your boss isn't listening to this podcast.
I don't think so.
Okay, good. We'll see, though, won't we? You have to try and make the right working environment and have those working relationships. The fact of Tony Khan being the director of football has been spoken about many times. It's not going to change. I like Tony Khan's passion for Fulham Football Club. I've been in his presence. He does have that sort of sardonic, self-effacing sense of humour. He is sometimes quite sharp, although never quite as sharp as he was the other night. I did enjoy that. But I like his passion for Fulham Football Club. I think that's a net positive because, he has a familial interest with the chairman. There are just things you could do a little bit better. You'd like to be a bit more proactive. And it would be nice to hear a little bit more from the senior figures of Fulham Football Club. I am surprised, at least in London and in the UK, it doesn't seem like they've made very much of the fact that Fulham are coming to America and playing showpiece matches.
That's too bad, Dan.
Major stadium. But it is true, isn't it? It doesn't seem to, in comparison to the MLS, I couldn't move the coverage of the MLS All-Star game against Arsenal. I know Mr. Cohen went there and he did a tweet saying Gabriel Jesus has scored with an audacious chip. And I said, I felt like saying that's not the most audacious chip you've ever seen in your life. There was a certain Texan who did it at Craven Cottage, son.
That's right. That's right. Well, I will tell you this.
Chelsea Wrexham got more coverage than our summer series has so far.
So far, Dan, the only thing I will tell you is that I do know that NBC Sports, along with Peacock, will be putting on a, as we would say, basketball terms, a full court press when it comes to the summer series. It just hasn't begun yet. I think you will notice it within a couple of days when Max and I are in Philadelphia. I think you're going to start to see the coverage really ramp up. You just haven't seen it yet. I do know that there's a lot of excitement. I know there are so many Fulham supporters that are going to be at that match I'm going to in Philadelphia. I cannot wait. I just want to say this, and I'm glad that you're on when I could say this. What was so great with me going over to England, the very first time I went over to England, was to spend time with you. I've enjoyed that like you wouldn't believe. That first day in London, I got to spend with you, Sarah Brooks, Mike Benedetto. I can't remember the other person. Maybe you do. But we had the great meeting at Craven Cottage at the cafe.
Carmelo Mifsud, wasn't it? It's Carmelo. Carmelo Mifsud.
No, it was not Carmelo. It was not Carmelo. Oh. I can't remember who it was, but I'm having a little senior moment, as Giannis would say. But what was great about this is that
Goldman.
Yeah, it was a Goldman. But what was fantastic about that weekend is I got to spend it with you. I got to be amongst the Fulham supporters and really feel that at Reading in the very crazy match at Reading. And then I followed that up in 2018 by going to the playoff final, and I really felt the Fulham experience. I cannot wait to be amongst the Fulham supporters in Philadelphia. I am very happy to be doing a live show, a Fulhamish Live with Max, with Sammy James, and George Cooper. It's going to be a lot of fun. There are going to be Fulham supporters there. They're recording it live. And then later on that night, Dan, I'm going to a meetup that's sponsored by the club. That's going to be great. And then I got the match on Sunday. I think it's going to be pretty spectacular. I cannot wait, my friend.
Yeah, and I think it's worth reiterating to many of your listeners will be in the United States. Those meetups, in Philadelphia, 2 in Orlando, I think, and 1 in DC.
Yes,
they're free, and you can go there, and you can mingle with the Fulham fans groups. Fulham DC, Fulham in Florida, and I'm not sure the Philadelphia Fulham fan group has a name that I've never quite been able to pronounce. Some sort of play on Philly and Fulham.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I need to get Max to corroborate that for me. And I've been to a Fulhamish Live recording before. They're great guys, and you'll have a great time. I would just say as well that something that I've seen on Twitter just as I was coming on with you, Rodney Marsh, the former Fulham centre forward of some repute, is going to be in Orlando, Florida.
He is, absolutely.
For that meetup with Peter Mellor,
Yes.
another ex-Fulham player, for the game against Aston Villa. That's the one at the Ivanhoe Park Brewing Company. And if you've not been in Rodney Marsh's company, he does Grumpy Pundits, I think, in the...
Oh, he's fantastic. He's fantastic.
But if you've not been in Rodney Marsh's company, then you need to be in Rodney Marsh's company at least once, because it is an incredible experience. And he
came on the show once, by the way, Dan. I actually had him on the show. Fantastic.
And he did come to Craven Cottage and help pick up Bobby Moore's Forever Fulham Award with Stephanie Moore and the Moore family.
That's great.
And the class that Rodney Marsh showed that day, I hope you won't mind me saying this, it showed what Fulham Football Club was all about. And what how we do these things really well. And I do think it's great that the American fan base that supports Fulham so fanatically, you are a great embodiment of that yourself, because you all get up at crazy times to watch these matches. So it's great that Fulham are playing out there 3 times in the next week, and I hope you really enjoy it. I had some great time. Because
like I said, I'm really looking forward to it.
It's a special club. We love it. We're all crazy about Fulham, and sometimes they make us crazy. But it's all worth it in the end, isn't it?
It is, Dan. And I'm very happy that I'm going to be able to share this with my son. My son's coming with me. Brady's coming. So it'll just be him and myself, but it should be very special. So we're looking forward to it. Anyways, Dan, we do have to wrap it up because someone else has another show coming up. That would be you, Dan. So before we go, final thoughts before we go. And listen, I just want to thank you so much for doing this with me. I've enjoyed every minute of it, Dan. Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure, mate. We should do it more often. There was a time when Kyle had to move abruptly that I stepped in a little bit.
Oh,
more
you were
regularly.
fantastic. Yep.
But then you got a much better co-host in Max Cohen.
He's great. Max is great.
Max is a fantastic guy, and I do hope your listeners, get to meet Max and meet yourself. And it's much easier in America and that those Fulham communities that have sprung up get some more. Just in terms of my final thought, we haven't been able to touch on it. I would like to send my best wishes to Edwin van der Sar and Sergio Rico, both recovering from very serious, in Edwin van der Sar's case, a brain hemorrhage. In Sergio Rico's case, really coming out of a coma. Both of them were fighters on the field in their career. Sergio's career is still going. Edwin needs no introduction to anyone at Fulham or the football world. And, all of our thoughts are with them and their families as they go through this period of, being reacquainted to life at home and, getting back to full fitness. And hopefully we see them in a football setting and with their families again very soon, because they were special people. And they are special people, and it's important to stress that. But yeah, I love doing this with you, mate. Let's do it again soon, and come on you once.
Absolutely. And Dan, I'm glad that you mentioned Edwin van der Sar and Sergio Rico. That's a great way to end the show with your final thoughts. My final thoughts, as I've already said several times during the show, and I'll say it one more time, that how special this upcoming weekend is for me and my son. We're going to be driving from Boston to Philadelphia that morning to be on Fulhamish Live, and then, of course, everything else that goes along with it. And the best part for me is just going to be amongst the Fulham supporters. I have enjoyed it every time, and I cannot wait again. So this is a massive weekend for me, and I'm looking forward to it. But I am going to wrap up the show. Before I go, as always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. For my very special guest, Dan Crawford from HamyEnd.com and the Green Pole Podcast, I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the talkSPORT Fan Network.